Mark.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Very good. Thank you for being with us. So, Paul,
Well,
on to
Happy to
you.
be together.
hey, thank you, Francis. Thank you, everybody. Hey, good morning, Mark Miles.
Hey, how are you, Paul?
I'm fine. It is very good to see you. I think we've only had a brief opportunity to say hello face to face here at the last year, and that was at Robin Miller's memorial. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you again, personally, and on behalf of our racer team, to you and your team, uh, for all the kindness and support you showed Robin in his life journey, and especially near the end. It meant everything to us.
Well, I'm an Indianapolis guy and knew Robin a bit, even back to his covering the Pacers and other sports for our local papers. And to me, he's in one way an institution,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the memory and what he's been a part of is incredible. Nothing I liked more than our going to Working Man's Friend for a cheeseburger to talk about Neto and the bar and
Yeah.
whatever came up. And he was also so important to our sport and a friend. So just hated to see what he had to go through, but there wasn't anything we didn't want to do for Robin if we could.
And I saw that repeatedly, and I think the showing the polarity in the world that we share. There's this famous video of Robin pointing a finger, standing on the front straightaway at the pit lane, rather, at Auto Club Speedway, speaking specifically to you in this video about what he needed to see happen about promoting races, blah, and at the same time, you two were genuinely friends and got along, and it I think people don't fully take on board the fact that those two things could coexist. You could be sometimes critical in a public forum, yet have honest friendship and frank discussions about things. And that, to us, again, meant everything. And I think the first frank discussion I had with you was it 9 years ago this week, perhaps?
Yeah, I remember it very well. It was like the comment I just, when I videoed in, hearing how among racers, a 5 minute conversation can become an hour or an hour and a half or whatever. That one went long.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had it was our first meeting. It was in the Columbia Club bar.
Yes, it was.
And I think you drank a lot that night. I'm not sure what
Well, for me, drinking a lot is two glasses of anything.
happened. I'm just kidding, as you
Yeah,
know.
that's it. If I make it past two, I fall asleep. But yeah, and I think I just remember being impressed, and I had a excitement in me that this could be great for IndyCar, having you join the company, and your background. And I want to talk about that a little bit because people see you as the CEO of Penske Entertainment, and before you were something else before you came to this sport. Uh, and that journey, you had just come off of successfully, organizing the Super Bowl in Indianapolis, is where I met you. But could you just give a little background to our audience and tell them about your journey to the moment we're sharing now?
Yeah, I love the way you asked that because often people ask it talk about your career, and in fact, I still don't think it's a career; it's a journey,
Yeah.
and it's very much serendipity in a lot of ways. A lot of times, I feel like Forrest Gump
Yep.
because I never really decided what I wanted to do. To answer the question more directly, I'm from Indianapolis, went to schools here, went to college here. Um, Accidentally got involved in a political campaign in 1974. I was bored,
Uh-huh.
and somebody said, "Go see this guy named Mitch Daniels, who was just two or
Yeah.
three years out of Princeton." And so that happened. I loved the adrenaline. Right? It isn't what when you think about a political campaign, there's so much to not like
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
and but the idea that you start that you're going to know if you won or lost on the first Tuesday in November.
Yeah.
And so it's incredibly intense work. I learned I didn't need to sleep much. And I ended up getting involved in and ultimately managing a few campaigns over, I don't know, 8 years or so, including the mayor of Indianapolis's campaign. And then people know Dan Quayle. I ran Dan's first campaign for the U.S. Senate
Yeah.
and went to D.C. for a little while with him. The importance of that is it's kind of leadership boot camp.
Yeah.
I just did it because I was having fun. I loved the adrenaline and the challenge and the people
Yeah.
who were high achievers that I was with. So there's that. And then the same people who were involved in politics and government in Indianapolis started the sports movement. It really embarked on a sports strategy. And so I got asked to be part of that. And after an event I was involved with, I was hired to be the president of the Pan American Games, which is the Summer Olympics for the Western Hemisphere. We ended up selling 1 million tickets, 38,000 volunteers. You know, you had languages, you had all those sports and all those practice venues. So it was a big undertaking at a young age. So now I'm in sports, but I didn't think I was in sports. I just did this event. And then I got involved as a volunteer in trying to turn around a declining men's professional tennis tournament in Indy.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was a civic thing. And I played college tennis, so I knew tennis. And then eventually I get asked if I'll go run the men's professional tennis tour, which I didn't want to do. We said no for my wife and I with 2 young children for 2 years because Indy was home.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry if I'm going on too long, but I was
No, but I'm just thinking, so far you've ended up doing things you didn't intend to do, but then you do them really well. I do hope you intended to do this thing with IndyCar when we get to that part of the story, because this is interesting.
I'll get to it as quickly as I can. But so we're buying a kid's book for our 5-year-old to take to a birthday party, and we're in the kids' bookstore, and we've been, you know, saying no for 2 years to go to Florida, this tennis thing. And I find Dr. Seuss's book entitled "Oh, the Places You'll Go," which was his commencement address just before he died, but it became one of Dr. Seuss's books. And it's all about life's journey and the forks in the road. And I literally go through this book in 3 minutes, say to my wife, damn, we're going to have to take this job.
Oh, wow.
We're leaving. And so that ended up being 15 years. To that point in my life, I hadn't done anything for more than 3 years. It was just the next fun,
Yeah.
you know, challenging gig. And then tennis was a good fit for me. It was very global. It was a league, right? And it was a sort of startup league.
Yes.
Because the governance of the sport had just been blown up. Come back home, I get asked to be a volunteer chairman of our Super Bowl after I'd said to my wife, and she had agreed with me, I'm not doing any more sports. We're going to come back to Indianapolis from being gone for 15 years and try to be more involved in affecting people's lives.
Yeah.
And then Mayor Ballard calls and says, will you chair our Super Bowl? I did that. Then I get asked to go on the board. Here's where these worlds come together, of the Holman George Company, at a time when there were going to be a majority of directors that were not family, and the place needed help.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I was the board liaison to the Boston Consulting Group, which was brought in to try to create a growth strategy, knowing that we weren't going to follow a playbook that they gave us, but that we would work with them to create options. And then I get called after the Super Bowl by the other outside directors saying, will you come work here and run this place? And here was my thinking quickly, Paul. Look, I've done big events, the Pan American Games and others, and I've done a league. And I don't know anything about cars. I was always an IMS fan because I came here to have fun, you know, and I was captured to the event, the 500, in the way that so many people are. But you know, there's a lot of commonality in leagues. You have to understand how to get stakeholders on the same page. You have to make rules. You have to hammer your stakeholders when they transgress. You've got to promote, sell sponsorships, TV, etc. And I knew something about big events. So between the IMS portion of it as an event and the IndyCar portion as a league, I thought, well, maybe we can find good engineers and I can suck up what Paul Fanner thinks in 2 hours in a bar and what Robin thinks. And I hope I'm a good listener, and I hope I can sort through what I think we can do and set a path and be clear about it and get stakeholders on board so all of us can, you know, be aligned and on the same agenda.
And I just have to say, thank God you did.
That
because
seems
this,
a little over the top, but thank you.
yeah, but seriously, I think that, life is a journey, and I've been on this part of the journey with you. And, I've gotten to know each other over the years, and certainly, the first meeting, the first impression was so positive of you and your passion, your energy. Uh, you don't do things lightly. I could see that when we were talking. And I think the first words out of your mouth, why should I do this? And it was an interesting conversation. But where it led to is, you happen to be uh, uh, the one soul that showed up at this pivotal moment in this, long story of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500 in this sport. You showed up at the moment of profound change, and little did we know when we met how much change would occur while you were uh, driving this very big ship in very turbulent waters. And the the thing that I think that I wanted to talk about today, and this is a good day to do it because it's literally almost on top of this anniversary of us meeting, is what did you see that turned out to be exactly what you thought it was and had the potential to be, and what did you not see? What lesson did you learn coming from another sport, coming from another background? And you can answer that question in whatever order you like, but I think it's going to be instructive to people. Having someone from another sporting league come in and do this, it's going to be useful. We can all see something new from you.
Yeah, so let me take that piece first. There was a very clear analogy from tennis that applied to what I was getting into, IMS and IndyCar.
Right.
In tennis, the 4 Grand Slams are dominant. They are Olympic-like events. Most of them net $100 million profit a year. They're independent from the league.
Right.
And there was always the fear of a split where the players or we had enough of their independence and decided to take them on. And there are lots of ways that could have happened. Or they could have had enough of us trying to impose our rules on them and said, screw it, we're going to have our own tour. Mm-hmm. And so you already get that, right? It could have happened, and we worked hard to get to a better place. But what I always believed was that the tour, call it the league, where the slams, the 800-pound gorillas could sit on the sideline and not work to lift the whole tour, the whole sport. Only the sport in their country was wrong. Was not an optimal structure. So for me, when I come to IMS and IndyCar and they're owned by the same shareholders, it's like perfect.
Right.
To me, from the very beginning, those two need to be joined at the hip. The IMS needs to do everything in its power to leverage the growth of the IndyCar and vice versa. And I remember my first year out here at the track, you couldn't find an IndyCar logo. Wait a minute, this is the Super Bowl and the league's not here? I mean, by the way, those are the cars from the league and the drivers from the league. So we believed from the beginning that you couldn't separate them. And there were a lot of people, including some people occasionally in the boardroom, who thought, well, the one that's losing the money is IndyCar. Let's jettison that or put it into somebody else's hands and separate them. And I think that was a direct learning from my tennis days that I have had always a very strong conviction about. And happily, by the way, Roger Penske feels exactly the same way.
Yes.
They're part of the same deal. Yeah. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the relevance of the experience, the idea that you could actually go have the slams and the league and own them both, right? It was just a great opportunity if we stayed the course.
And stay the course you have through, sometimes some very choppy waters and strong headwinds. But I do have to say, if the audience is unaware, we have crossed 10 million unique visitors so far this year. Thank you, IndyCar and team, for energizing your audience to the point we were able to add 4 million people over 2020, where we added 2 million people over 2019. And the large chunk of that audience growth is your sport. They're showing up in numbers on our website and engaging in our social media. We had over 1 million shares of content directly off our website in the month of May. It's the largest month in the history, the 24-year history of Racer.com. And that the Indianapolis 500 is, drove that. Of course, Helio's win was a big part of that. I'll touch on something here that is stunning to me. The 2 qualifying days where Peretta Autosport was attempting to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 equaled and it actually exceeded race day in traffic.
Wow.
We've seen this growth in female audience on our platform. We've seen a decrease in age. Some of that we do believe is Formula One driven, but I think you have some common DNA with Formula One. I think that the audiences cross over. But looking at this, you have a diversity initiative. We'll have that be a topic yet tomorrow. But talk to us a little bit about these things that are going on now within your company that I think are pretty interesting. You've got diversity. You've got an all-female or female forward team in the Indy 500 this year. Hopefully next year as well. And you have a raft of new young talent coming in. Talk to us about that.
Let me just say a word about qualifying first. I thought that was when I got involved. This is not about me, I mean that. But among the most suboptimized assets, in our ecosystem. I remember what qualifying used to be, unbelievable. And the crowds, the drama, all of that. And, we changed the format so that if we could get enough entrants trying to get in the race, we could have bumping as the culmination of the 2 days.
Yes.
All the 2 days. And, a lot of people still think bump day is supposed to be the first day or pole day is supposed to be the first day. To me, it didn't make any sense. We needed to flip that on its head. I still get grief from people about that, but to me, everybody has a point of view. I just happen to be able to do that one.
Yeah. By the way, I could just look at the metrics and tell you were right.
Well, but the most important thing that sort of set the foundation for it was that we got the cars and the teams and the drama to get in the race on that Sunday, and that we got NBC to cover both days. So, I've often said, I just use my authority and my credential to stand at the head of the line to watch each car go out for their qualifying attempts.
Yeah.
I think it's the most amazing day in sports. What those drivers are about to go do when they get the finger that says go is just incomprehensible. But anyway, so we announced in July on NBC of the Brickyard race that we were going to have we gave it a name. I almost didn't because I didn't want anybody to think it was some kind of a stunt or thing that would start and stop at some date. It was really our way of saying the sport has to be diverse. It's the right thing to do. It's important to our growth. And so we need to change the way we are as a sport. The way I think is, so we got to get our own house in order first. And I didn't want to talk a lot about it. It's hard work to be a more diverse employer and to make a more diverse employee group feel welcome and comfortable. We need to do more business in terms of our procurement and our contractors. Those things which we've just scratched the surface on, but they're priorities for us, and we're making progress. But then the outward things, which for the public and for our fans are probably much more important. Roger gets it, in my mind, the credit for. So I learned about his conversations with Beth when they pretty much had him done. We didn't say, hey, let's have a woman-owned and woman-populated race team. Roger just put it together. And I might have signed an agreement that formalized it, but that was Roger's vision and capital and commitment, and then Team Penske helping and all the rest of it. Phenomenally cool. And when you get into the details of how they did, he called it their combine, right? To select women who would be part of the crew that would go over the wall, and they were up, that story. It's just so cool. There's so much narrative, so much content there that women, and anybody could relate to. So full credit to RP. And then in terms of racial diversity, the idea of amping up a long-established not-for-profit in Indianapolis at the IMS that attracts kids through karting and other curriculum to the sport. That got a huge increase in funding. We didn't have to write that check. We found sponsorship support for it.
Yeah.
Then we got some other in-kind help, and it's great. And it's piloted growth. It doubled its size in Indianapolis. We stuck our toe in the water. Someday I think there'll be a chapter in Detroit. We're going to try to do the same thing in East St. Louis.
Great.
And so that I think it's just really powerful and important. And then for Roger to pick Coach Reed, who started that program I was talking about, to be his principal for a race team and to start in the road to Indy and work their way up is very cool. And so now they're at the lights level, and he's got an objective, and the year kind of vacillates a bit because it'll be when we're ready. But if that program can actually have put a diverse driver, a racially diverse driver, at least in the qualifying for the 500 in a not very distant future, will be a terrific thing. And I think will snowball and attract other similar efforts to truly make us more welcoming and more diverse.
Well, all of that is very encouraging to me, because I think racing has a huge opportunity to reflect society, and certainly in the marketing sphere, when we're I guess homogenous in one demographic or racial or heritage, it is limiting us. The world is a very diverse place, and I think we have this moment where just looking at the metrics that Paretta Autosport, and just stunning to me. I'm at the time I was watching it, I just thought to myself, first off, my wife and one of my daughters came in to watch the qualifying attempts. I can just tell you how unusual that is.
Yeah. I had my granddaughters at the line with me,
yes.
Even though they were underage, just briefly to soak it in.
Yes, and I had neighbors asking me about it that don't follow racing, and I think for me that spoke volumes of what we still have left on the table as a sport. I think the greatest single opportunity for motorsports overall is speaking to 51% of the population that is not being welcomed enthusiastically. They don't have the role models at the top of the sport to realize they belong as equally as the male population.
I agree with you completely, but let me mention what I think is another pivotal opportunity along those lines, which is all about youth.
Yes, agreed.
That is sustainability. So we haven't talked much about it yet, but we're doing a lot of work. And by the way, Penske Corp is as well.
Yes.
But at Penske Entertainment, it's a very high priority to get our agenda together for the sport. And that isn't exactly the same, but I do think you don't have much to talk to young people about.
Yeah.
If you got nothing to say about being responsible from an environmental point of view. And we have fans who think that's rubbish probably, but there's no question among the younger folks that we need to have be part of the sport. It's just kind of a gate issue. And so you're going to hear a lot more about that, but I think it, like gender, it's young.
Yeah.
A big demographic that we have to have something to say to.
Good, because you're helping me transition to some of my other topics here in a few minutes. But I think that, looking at this, you've leaned into this. That's why, we're going to, have this discussion tomorrow with. I'll mention this a bit as well when I talk to Jay Fried. George Tamayo will be handling the interview with Jimmy McMillan, who is going to be speaking as your Chief Diversity Officer.
Great.
Yeah, and then we'll have a panel with Beth and her team. So the evidence is there that you are doing all these things, and congratulations for being a leader in this. I think you've identified the environmental responsibility. The world belongs to the people of the future. I used to have a saying, and it's become little tired now. There's going to be a struggle in the first part of this century between 20th century people and 21st century people in terms of mindset. The 21st century mindset's going to win. It's just inevitable. We're at that tipping point right now where that's happening before our very eyes. We're watching this generation come forward. Their values, their belief systems are going to be what defines what we all are doing. And, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was a place where, first really significant breakthrough, I think, in technology, also having the Janet Guthrie moment in 1977,
Yeah.
The Willie T. Ribbs moment, is equally powerful. I think there's a greater story, and one of my dreams is to see a woman's face on the Borg Warner Trophy.
Be phenomenal. Just
It would be, because no symbol stands, I think, out there in the world that would say this has happened and it's permanent.
Well, and back to your first questions about my other life, there aren't very many other sports where men and women can go toe to toe, or in this case, wheel to wheel, and the woman can win just because of the nature of the genders generally. Yeah. So I love that we have this opportunity in racing, and it would be phenomenal to see that happen.
I agree, and you have, I think the biggest stage in motorsports to be able to have that happen, and I hope I live to see it, and I see progress in that direction. So I wanted to transition. You brought it up, so we're going to have, and I didn't want this to be too technical today, but we've had a number of discussions, and I think engaged in a project with you a while back about imagining the future of IndyCar, and you're on the cusp of a pretty significant change in platform and powertrain, and hoping to attract additional manufacturers to the sport. Can you just give us I guess an update from your 1,000-foot view of where you think you're at with that, and where you want all this to go? Where do you want IndyCar to be through the next cycle and the cycle after that?
In part, it's really hard to get my head around the cycle after that, to be frank.
Yeah.
Things are changing so fast especially in the automotive industry. So it's hard to know what the cycle after that looks like. It may be technologies nobody's talking much about, but I think we have to find our way. We got to get that third OEM. The third OEM, like the current two, are starting to think more about other powertrain technologies. So the hybrid that we've talked about is, I think, an important initiative. I'm sure Jay will talk with you more about that, but we've invested real money, and we've pulled together Honda, Chevy, and the other key suppliers to develop that technology so it'll work for IndyCar and do some cool things besides just make the statement that we're aware that it's not just internal combustion engines that are ruling the world, but it'll do some good things in terms of boost and getting yellows a mile and a half away on some turn on a road course cleared up quick, and all the rest of it. So there's that. We'll see. One thing we're just beginning to get our heads around is the opportunity in this context related to Indy Lights.
Yes.
So why couldn't Indy Lights not be Xfinity to Cup, but be more of a laboratory for us, more of a place where we can innovate? So I'll give you examples, but I probably shouldn't, because this is meant only to be illustrative, not to be a plan.
Yeah.
But what if Lights is a place where you could see both electric vehicles? Maybe Lights is more than Lights, right? But you got IndyCar and you got Lights and you got something else, and maybe you can see internal combustion at the top of the heap. IndyCar racing pretty much the way we know it. Maybe there's an electric component on that weekend, and maybe there's an autonomous component on that weekend. Not because we don't want drivers in our cars, that is the sport. But if we could also show off different technologies while not completely disrupting our essence at the moment, maybe that's an interesting conversation. So I don't know what it looks like in the second phase. In the first phase, I think it's the hybrid and and the changes to the engine that is more traditional, that are more traditional. And hopefully we'll get that third OEM in, not to put any undue pressure on him, but we've had it for years now. It's his turn. If anybody can figure out how to do that, it'll be Roger Penske,
Yes,
his team. So we're
he
optimistic.
knows a few OEMs from what I've seen.
Yeah, and they know him.
They know him. He sells a lot of their cars for them. So yes,
Exactly.
and that's an intriguing thought about lights. I think having the ability, and now that it's owned and controlled again, it's completely controlled now by Penske Entertainment. You can do what you need to do. I think that it's produced some remarkable talent. You look at its intention is to produce talent, and not just talent in the driving side, but on team ownership side and the mechanics, the PR, everything that's flowing out of that has been really a contribution to the sport overall. But having a slightly different storyline could be a very cool thing, and it is a place maybe where the risk is lower to try other things. I commend you for thinking that way, Mark, and it's one of the things
It might not be about the car, it could be,
yeah,
this is where we show racing on Twitch.
yeah.
I'm just making that up, but
But why not?
Why not use this to innovate and to try
Right.
things? So we'll see the pace of that, but it's very much an opportunity I think we're going to get our heads around.
Well, again, that's a good transition to one of the other things I wanted to talk about today. You've had a nice, you've had, I think, two very good CMOs here in a row that have worked with IndyCar. CJ O'Donnell was someone I knew before, and you asked me about. I said I was excited when he came in, and now S.J. Ludke, who I'd met years ago when she was at Andretti Autosport, has done a very good job. And your sport has got a clear voice in the market space, and well-developed, creative, and very clear messaging. And I think, where do you go now, though, that the world is changing and marketing is changing? What is the vision for how you engage people in your sport in a world where there are, just 1,000 ways to do it, literally?
Yeah, well, I think there's both the content and then there's the distribution. And the content, we've touched on a lot of it, right? There's so many stories. We didn't talk about what happened on the track this year, right?
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Okay. So there's that, but I think distribution is what's shifting. And for us, we're making investments, and we can't make enough investment in everything digital. So if you look at how many people we have compared to, say, NASCAR, that are in our digital world, in our social media world, there's some factor, some multiple of how many people we have. And it's not about head count, it's about the ability to generate content, right? That's interesting, that's compelling, that's short form, etc. And that will apply to especially social, but it'll also apply to a lot of our advertising. We don't have the kind of budget the NFL does to convey our brand, but more of what we do have will be digital advertising, I'm sure. So I think, in a nutshell, that's the newer emphasis.
Yeah, and social seems to be a big focus for your company as well. And you have, I think it's really telling here. We have one driver this year that really stood out on social, Romain Grosjean. We see it when there's anything with him involved. The share count, the view count, page view count, everything skyrockets because of his following. And this is not a criticism, it's an observation, this is an area where you have a lot of room to grow. Is there a catalyst or an accelerant that's available to you in this strategy going forward to transform your position? You have this new relationship with NBC that is a terrific one on traditional broadcast. Do you have a view to try to find a way to create accelerating relationships? Because I look at Google News and I want to look for racing, I find only a NASCAR tab.
Yeah. Well, as we both said, we've got a long way to go. One initiative of SJ's, and I concur, by the way, I think she's doing a terrific job, that is being scaled up is the influencer world.
Mm-hmm.
And so take Long Beach, Southern Cal, bring in half a dozen people who are social influencers who get paid to do it, right? I mean, they make a living at it. They have huge followings, and find the ones that are open to getting exposed to racing, in this case, Long Beach Grand Prix, and watch what happens. It's incredible the leverage you get from them for a weekend at least, using, getting in front of their followings. And then the real home run is where they start to stay interested. And I just think the leverage, the scalability of that is enormous, and it's not real expensive.
Yeah.
We have to be prepared to, they might say things we'd rather they didn't say, right? Because there's some risk.
Yeah.
But I really like that as for us, a newer initiative that's quite intentional.
Great, and I think that I'm glad you mentioned all of this, because I'm also notorious for being critical of social media influencers that are disingenuine. They have no real interest. It's clear they're being paid. They show up, they leave immediately, and it's disrespectful to the actual core fan base when you have that. And then you have the people that walk the grid and shove aside the series reporter, like we saw at COTA in the Formula One race. When you have people who are authentically enthusiastic and carry the enthusiasm forward to their audience, they get it. It's the best possible outcome, and I encourage that. I think that IndyCar racing is there's nothing in my mind more authentic. The Indy 500 is the heart and soul of authenticity in American racing. So being authentic and social is a very important part of the story. You need people to welcome newbies in, people that haven't been exposed to racing. When you have someone that's their surrogate, if you will, that's being exposed, that carries it forward, it works very well. So I think good idea. Keep it going. Something's happening here, and I think that the audience that we're talking to today needs to understand that you're outpacing the rest of the racing series right now in terms of growth. Everything grew last year massively for us, and the year before it grew massively. IndyCar's growing twice as fast on all of our platforms. Something you're doing, the essence of what you're doing, and what your athletes are doing, your teams are doing on track, and your broadcast partner is doing, is driving all of this. If you're sitting you're on the aircraft carrier in the admiral's chair, what do you think that one thing is when you're deploying all of this out into the universe? Something is really changing right now for you.
I'll try to answer the question the way you put it, but I've got to say, I've always resisted the idea that there's one thing.
Yeah.
I think there's 200 things, and we got to do better at all of them all the time. They're not all the same. So I'll honor your question. You told me in our first meeting, and the world who cared about us was saying, you've got absolutely compelling sport on track, but nobody knows it.
Yeah.
So I think the key is it's even gotten better, the sport, the racing. And, all that you should give the talk better than more than I, but what happens at every race, and everybody who has a chance, and the newcomers and the young and the old and the international and the national US, and all that playing out in a way that you don't just tune in the end of the fourth quarter to see who hits the last shot. I mean, I love our sport. I love our racing. I think it's compelling sport, and that is about authenticity. And if it weren't for that, none of this would be happening. Then it's about distribution, and the clarity of the messages, and which channels you reach which people in. It's about trying things to bring in new eyeballs, new fans, without running off our established fans that might be, in some cases, a little more traditional. So that's a little bit of an art form. But fundamentally, the one thing is what sport is more compelling. I love where we are on the track, and boy, I don't ever want to see us screw that up.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like you have, based on what I saw on track this year. My God, what a season. And let's talk about that a little bit, because the winds of change were blowing strongly as the season opened at Barber Motorsport Park this year. So talk to us a little bit about that, and talk to us about what we have now in terms of the lineup of athletes and teams, and the fact that people are coming to IndyCar now. They're from around the world. They want to be here.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch and to see the benefits of it. So we'll get to drivers.
Yeah.
But let's start with teams.
Yeah.
I mean, to see the Arrow McLaren Schmidt gang really become not one of the top three, but now there's really a top four. Those guys are right there. And how'd that happen in record time? From not being able to get Fernando in the race, basically, to being a top tier team that can attract top tier drivers and compete for the championship where they are. And there's no reason to believe that's not going to continue. That's really cool. But we've also added other teams. Love to see that. It's a desirable value proposition to teams. What it costs them to compete in a sport where they can compete and win, and for the exposure they're going to get, I think it's a great value proposition. And I think that's been way out of whack, frankly, in our sport and other series. It's a great strength of ours. Very important. But then there's the drivers, and it's all related. But I didn't know where to start. I mean, Elio winning the fourth and coming back next year to be the only guy to get 5, and being Elio. I mean, oh my God, that's just you couldn't write that script.
That was iconic.
Yeah, it's just,
that was absolutely an iconic moment that will live forever in the history of the Indianapolis.
But it wasn't like he then retired.
No,
he's still here, right? And so it's really fantastic. And then you have, Palou and Pato. And by the way, the reason why we have, I don't know you'll know if it was really the first time, but at least in my memory, to have a Spanish language broadcaster take at least 3 races next year. Think, it's the Spanish drivers and the folks they can attract as viewers in this country, but they're also young and fresh. Yeah, and they are right there. In fact, they got to the championship, the Astor Cup, and you're watching Scott and all those veterans who we know are the real deal go nose to nose. I just it's young, old, but it's also kind of the Cinderella story too. And so you see that stuff play out if you watch March Madness and eventually the Final Four, right?
You do, yeah.
Lights up the tournament when some challenger's coming out of nowhere and has a story that's endearing. And that's what's happening on the track. Young, old, international, domestic. Paul, you remember when I started, we were just getting killed because, where are the Americans?
Yeah.
I don't even hear that anymore.
No, you don't. And
the international drivers are appealing. And as in the Grosjean example, they bring tons of fans we're really happy to welcome to us. So it's just great stuff.
And you have some great American drivers, and I think we, for IndyCar, thankfully, one of them is staying in IndyCar. That's Colton Herta, who is the youngest IndyCar winner in history. And I think he took that from Scott Dixon, if I recall, who will probably be racing when Scott Dixon will be on to his 11th championship when I'm in my 90s. But the thing I think you have right now is the Big Mo, and what do you do with it? You don't get this very often, and in life and in sports, especially when you have such a surge of momentum, you are on network television. A hell of a lot of your events are on network television. First off, that is an accelerant for momentum. Tell us how that happened. And your partner, NBC, which I think we look at the moment you took off on our metrics, is directly aligned with the moment you went on to NBC.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's been a focus from the beginning. When I started and I looked at, not having 50 events,
right,
and having 2 broadcasters split whatever it was at the time, 16 or 17 events, including the double headers, just doesn't make sense. Didn't give any broadcast partner the reason to care about us,
Right.
really. And that's so important. So getting to NBC previously, and now these new arrangements where we became a network sport, all but 14 races plus 2 days of Indy qualifying. We're a network sport full on. And if you just do the math, and you can use whatever approximations you want, but if you assume that a cable audience is probably a third of a network audience, it
Right.
could be a fourth.
Yeah.
And now we went from 9 to 14. It's easy to do the math. We're going to have meaningful growth on linear media next year. And NBC, thinking about us as one of their network products, has even more reason to promote us better and to sell us more. They need network content to sell. They are also a business, right? And they don't have the National Hockey League, which was a network product primarily.
Yes, it was. Yes.
So things have aligned beautifully there. And I'll tell you what I think it means beyond just the obvious reach or exposure increase. By becoming a network sport, I think it opens up an additional strategy for partners and sponsors we bring to the sport. So what do I mean? It's been primarily a B2B sport.
Mm-hmm.
So we bring in companies that want to do business in our ecosystem, and it's worked. It's gotten us to where we are. But think back to the days, sort of the halcyon growth days of NASCAR, when they brought consumer brands into the sport, consumer brands that activated, that used the racing and the team and the driver and the car to sell their products to consumers. We really have longed for that, I would say, for a long time. And that can change now. And so just take Hy-Vee as an example.
Yes.
I mean, that's a consumer brand with 300 plus retail outlets in the Midwest. They're going to be buying time, not just a lot of time for the 2 races that weekend in Iowa, but also throughout the whole of the series. And we're likely to have a title sponsor at another race I won't go into yet. That's a consumer brand that will lift that event, but it will also buy television time around the series. And the more we can get consumer brands that do business that way invested in our sport, where NBC is kind of the momentum is hugely important, right? Nobody wants to put any money in something that's headed south. But at the same time now, to have their agencies think about us as a network event and the network salespeople at NBC selling us that way, I think opens up a whole nother strategic opportunity that won't go from none or 1 to 20 sponsors in a year, but is a big opportunity.
Absolutely, and that's having lived through all these eras. I mean, I think I've been around IndyCar racing professionally since 1972, and the one thing that's been central to its viability and visibility has been network television. I don't think that's going to change, and this absence of consumer brand visibility and validation is, I think you're right on about that. But I also think, you lead into another area I wanted to talk about. You had an amazing event happen in Nashville this year.
Yeah.
It rocked our world. Again, metrics don't lie. That one was a big deal in the racer sphere on social and on page views and everything else. But it also was a marker down about what you can be in terms of this cultural impact on a region. Tell us about that event, and do you have plans for others like this?
Yeah, well, I want to get to the second part of that quickly, but it was phenomenal, right? Nashville's on fire in the best sense of it.
Yeah.
And is a trend-setting community at this point. And it's young, and it's music, and it's just got so many, it's also a corporate explosion of headquarters and all the rest of it. And they're really good at doing events.
Yeah.
I think Indianapolis has proven itself to be really good at doing all kinds of events.
Absolutely.
And Nashville's right there, they're just doing phenomenally well. So when the right group came together, we thought we had the opportunity to make a real splash in that market, and they did well, and they loved it, and it'll be better this year. So we saw the fallout, the benefit of that beyond just in every channel, the increase in audiences and the buzz and the way we're positioned as a sport. So love it, and love that it's coming back, and hopefully bigger and badder than in the first installation. So then what, right? So Hy-Vee isn't Nashville in terms of an urban setting, but it can be the kind of event because of Hy-Vee
Yeah.
that can create a, punch above its weight class, can create an impact
Yes.
that is beyond what we think of, frankly, historically, as the Iowa Speedway.
Yeah.
And that's because these guys execute. They are marketers. They have retail outlets all over the Midwest. They're going to spend in broadcast and social and digital media. They're going to bring in content, music, and all the rest of it. It's going to be, people are going to go, where'd that come from? It is really going to be not just great racing, which we expect, but a very broadly impactful event. And then, so I guess that's another example of that. Those are the two that come to mind.
Okay, good. And I think that leads to the questions we consistently get and have been coming into chat are international events. I mean, obviously, to me, one of the places I believe personally, Mexico. Mexico City. I raced there once when I was a young guy, and there's such passion for racing in Mexico. Is there a plan or a hope?
Yeah. Well, broadly, we're not ready to work on a what I would call an international race strategy, but I don't consider Mexico international. I think we're a North American series.
Yes, right.
I'll count Toronto, right?
Okay, yes.
So it's not like you got to get the whole kit and fly it to wherever.
Right.
It's not harder for us to get into Mexico really than it is to get to Portland. And I'm not being pejorative about anything. It's just logistically quite feasible. So Mexico's always been interesting to us, and we even this last few months have had conversations. We just want to make sure that we go there at the right time.
Right.
We won't get any benefit we want lasting benefit. We want to develop the sport there. And Pato, God bless him, is not yet a household name.
Right.
Right. So we don't want to go have an event because somebody will put the money up and have it not knock our socks off and fade after the first year, to be frank. Yeah. So it's clearly a market in North America that we can see being in and would love to be in. But I think the question is, what's the right time in terms of the development of a fan base for us there? There is some, but they've done a phenomenal job with their F1 race, and we've got to find a way to get the right toehold to reflect well on our brand and develop more fans.
Well, we see it in our social. If I look at Facebook, Mexico City in Mexico is a place where there's a growing activity, a serious growing activity around the content related to IndyCar. And I think that, this question of going international comes up constantly. You've got a Spanish-born champion now, and you have a driver that's, really shaking everything up from a Swiss-French driver, or French-Swiss driver, perhaps a better way of saying that. Long term, I know you just said that you're not going to want to do, but is there ever an opportunity to go maybe do postseason mini championship, do something where there's a race once a year somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, look, you're talking to a guy who's spent more than 50% of his time for 15 years outside the U.S. doing sports business. Yeah. So I appreciate the opportunities. I absolutely appreciate the opportunities. I think they're there for us. I think our strategy right now is to focus on the momentum we got in North America.
Yeah.
And we're nowhere near where we can be in the U.S. So let's not get distracted. Saying that, I love the way you asked the question, and it is something we've thought about. Is there some way that it's maybe postseason one-off, but allows us to make a splash at the end of the year, for example?
Yes.
So I don't want to leave a hole on the championship. We start in late February or March.
Yeah.
We end in September. Let's kill it, right? I want to get the carpet bombing in the U.S.
Yes, absolutely.
As a marketer. And I don't want to take a 3-week hole to go abroad and be in the wrong time zone from a U.S. point of view. But there might be something more creative that, you know, when we find just the right opportunity that could be good for the whole sport and garner more attention as more of a one-off event outside the U.S.
Okay, great. That's fantastic to hear. And I had one question from, you know, it's repeated several times over the past week here on IndyCar panels. IndyCar Nation, what can you tell us what's happening with that? I just want to get the audience to, you know, your community that you're building around IndyCar. You know, your direct relationship with the fans. What are you doing related to the fan experience and bringing fans directly into when they feel like they belong to the sport?
Yeah. Well, when you say IndyCar Nation, I think you mean what we do at the track, right?
Yes.
And how we welcome the hardcore fan club, which we love. Well, one of the things I've enjoyed the most when I've had the opportunity to do it, and they're gathered in a room, is to go and just do this.
Yeah.
You just get so much out of their energy and their passion, if not, you know, a rotten tomato being thrown at you once in a while. So I'll be better able to answer your question at the end of the year. We're trying to finalize that plan yet this year. I think it's important. It's a matter of, you know, rationalizing competing resource demands.
Yeah.
But, you know, to have those opportunities to be face to face with fans and to give them the behind the scenes look and experience is terrific.
Yeah, and your fan base is your best advertising. I've got to tell you, the enthusiasm for the IndyCar fans drives a lot of our social media and social media commentary. They're very passionate about your company and what you do. And I really appreciate you and what you do, Mark. Thank you for being with us this morning. This has been a great catch-up, you know, and your entire team has done a terrific job weathering the pandemic. Quite a ride here for the first 2 years of since I think now we're at just shy of 25 months since the announcement of the Penske Entertainment, and here we are, success.
We can't wait for next year, and you know, who knows exactly what it'll mean, but in my mind, post-pandemic and reopening the 500 and really seeing what we can do with this momentum. And we really appreciate you, Paul, and Racer and your team and all you do to do really quality work in promoting the sport.
Well, thank you, Mark, and you know, we'll see you soon enough. I'll be in Indianapolis next week, so thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.